Hey, don't break here. In case you haven't watched my last video, I'm doing a staple on my channel called Manga Impressions, where I read a manga and I talk about my impressions and whether or not I'd recommend it to you guys. I'm doing this because recently I finished Magi and I made a video on Orient by the creator of Magi, and today we're going to be talking about Vinland Saga, and I've read the first 5 chapters. So let's get into it. Okay, just to give you some history on Vinland Saga, the manga in general. It's been out since April 13th, 2005. It is created by Yukimura Makoto. It's been ranked 36 pretty consistently since 2005. I'm pretty sure I actually didn't start being ranked at like 36 till later on in its development, but it's been very consistent with its ranking, and it is an action adventure drama historical seinen. It's a period piece about Vikings. This manga is set in the 8th century AD, and it's set in Western lands, Europe. So this first chapter is about the Vikings sieging Gish settlement with another Frankish tribe. And right off the bat, we get to see this onslaught of the Frankish tribe and how terrible they are at sieging, and whoever their commander is really bad. And the Frankish tribe sieging the Frankish settlement has to back off because they suck really bad at sieging. So the Vikings see that they siege really terribly, so they say that they want to help them so they can get the treasure that's inside the settlement. They're more in this for themselves than they are for the Frankish tribe sieging. They don't really care who they have to kill, they just want the gold to go home. It's interesting that the creator didn't hold back with this art. The writer and artist Yukimura, he didn't hold back with the violence in the art. It's very graphic, arrows going through people's chests, stomachs. It's pretty graphic. I like that a lot. Kind of reminds me of Berserk, the way it's drawn. In this chapter, we're introduced to Askeladd, Bjorn, and Thorfinn. Askeladd's the leader of this crew, this Viking crew. Bjorn is like his second in command, and Thorfinn is our protagonist. So, with each chapter I wrote notes on characters and what I thought they were, and how I perceived them while reading the chapter. Well, after reading the chapter. For Askeladd, I wrote that he's cunning and smart, and throughout the 5 chapters, yeah, he's cunning and smart. That doesn't change. I thought his spine was having fun after reading the first chapter. He isn't really worried about his comrade's death. He looks out for himself, but he has a crew, so maybe he isn't sure of his physical abilities. But you'll see later on that changed my idea, and that he actually does. He is capable of defending himself. Moreover, he postpones his battle with Thorfinn, but later on we figure out that he postpones his battle with Thorfinn for a reason. Bjorn is loyal and strong. He's Askeladd's second in command. He seems like a family man. That's why I imagined him as after reading the first chapter. He stays with Askeladd because of the money, but you don't really learn more about Bjorn in these 5 chapters, so I have to keep reading to figure out who exactly Bjorn is. Thorfinn, the protagonist, his father was a Viking. According to Thorfinn, Askeladd killed Thorfinn's father, Thors, and Thorfinn's pretty restless. He runs across the battlefield to retrieve the captain's head, the captain of the the Frankish settlement's head, the guy that's commanding the officers and stuff like that, the soldiers. He he rushes towards him, putting himself in harm's way. Easily he could have died. It kind of seems like he's not like looking out for himself, but he definitely did it without getting hurt. So can't say that he doesn't know what he's doing. He seems restless. He not idiotic. He's confident, and I thought at the end of this chapter his spine was living up to his father's name. His spine can't really be. At this point, I didn't think his spine was revenge, because if his spine was just revenge and killing Askeladd, then why wouldn't he just have assassinated Askeladd? He goes out of his way to get the captain's head so he can duel Askeladd. Some pretty cool visuals and things that happened in this chapter. When the Vikings like stormed the castle with their ship, that was pretty cool. It was like ridiculous, but it was cool. When Thorfinn's in the ramparts and he's murdering the soldiers to get to the captain. In chapter 2, Askeladd and his crew return home. Askeladd and Thorfinn duel, and there's themes of slavery and obsession in it. For chapter 2, I thought Askeladd, he's a very looked up to person in the village, probably like the main man, other than Gorm, who is his uncle that is probably like the chief of the village. He manages the money for the village. Askeladd, he's not the family man that I thought he was. According to Thorfinn, he Askeladd kidnapped Thorfinn and killed Thorfinn's father. He empathizes with Hordaland, Gorm's new slave, and talked about manipulating people. This makes me think he and Thorfinn's father worked close. At this point, I'm starting to think that maybe Askeladd kidnapped Thorfinn for a reason, and Askeladd actually made some kind of deal instead of like just plain old murder. I feel like the way he talked about obsession and manipulating people, I feel like he didn't just do it out of fun. I'm pretty sure he had a really good reason to do it. Here's themes of slavery and obsession. In this chapter, Askeladd talks about how Gorm is beating his slave with a whip and how like she's in chains, but Gorm can't see the chains that bind him. And it relates to Thorfinn because he has these chains of his obsession with Askeladd. He can't give his pride up and just kill Askeladd, because he has to duel Askeladd to prove that his father was a better warrior than Askeladd. And Thorfinn can't see himself that he's bound by the chains of his obsession and pride, that he has to kill Askeladd. Some things to note. Hordaland doesn't seem important, but I'm sure later on she will be. I'm not good at rating fight scenes that much, but the fight scene between Askeladd and Thorfinn was really good. And at this point, after reading this second chapter, I was pretty much hooked, and I was like on board with this manga because of how deep it seems. I like really enjoy it. So the last 3 chapters out of the 5 that I've read is a flashback of Thorfinn's family. In this flashback, we learn that Thorfinn wanted to sell since he was younger. Him selling with Askeladd and selling in general wasn't anything new. He always wanted to do it since his father. We see some world building of Norse mythology with how Thorfinn thought the world just ended and it was protected by a serpent, and if you went too far off, the serpent would like take your ship out. We are introduced to his uncle Leif, Leif. I think it's Leif. Leif just tells the story about Vinland, and on top of his head, he's wearing like a chieftain. Just call it a helmet, for lack of a better word. He's wearing like a chieftain helmet. It looks Native American-ish, so I'm assuming he went to America, and that's what Vinland. In this chapter, we learn about Thor. Thor is a family man. He's very caring for his family, and he's against slavery. His daughter asks for a slave every single winter, and he says that she knows the answer because she asks for it every time, and he says no. The other villagers have slaves, but he doesn't, so that says something about his character and how he doesn't like slavery. In life, he tells the story about how they left Norway. Thor's left Norway because he didn't want to be a slave to the king. People left Norway because they didn't. The Norwegian people left Norway because they didn't want to bend the knee to the king. It was either bend the knee to the king or die. So the thing with slavery goes back to Thor's past, so it makes sense why he wouldn't want a slave. But this chapter is more of a setup chapter to set up the conflict between Thor's and Halfdan. Halfdan's slave flees during a blizzard, and Thor's and his family find him the morning of, and they take him in. And the slave is basically dying. He has frostbite all over his body. But in terms of the world building, it's really good. It's a really good chapter. You can feel the tension within the village and how they're worried about surviving with so little sheep and harvest. In chapter 4, Halfdan enters the village with his entourage, his crew. I keep calling it entourage. He enters the village with his crew. Halfdan and the villagers of Thor's village, they conflict. They don't like each other. In the past, they fought over boundaries, and Halfdan's men stole from the villagers. But it was settled at the assembly, the Viking assembly. It's an assembly. It's more like a democracy kind of thing. The leaders meet up and they discuss things, and they settled that there. So they haven't had problems since. But in terms of the tension between them, they still have it because Halfdan's men and this village's men have murdered each other and stolen from each other. So they haven't gotten past that completely. Thor's buys the slave from Halfdan for 8 young sheep. He buys a dying slave for 8 young sheep. And not to mention that this winter, they're already doing pretty poor on harvesting. They already don't have that many sheep. Now, if you look back at chapter 3 and how Thoris really doesn't like slavery, it makes me wonder at this point, after reading chapter 4, if Thoris values freedom more than his the lives of his family over his own life. Thoris values freedom, while Halfdan doesn't think a man is a man without chains. He thinks a man without chains is a savage. So he assumes that every man in the world has chains on himself. In chapter 5, a warship arrives, and it's the warriors of Yom. I think it's Jom. Yom. These warriors on the ship serve Thoris, I'm assuming, the way they bow to him. Either that or Thoris is a commander. According to Floki, who was Thoris's second in command, Chief Sigvaldi ordered all forces to return to for a war, whether they be active or deserter. In this episode, we learned that Thoris is actually a deserter of the Yom. I think he left because he felt like he was a slave to serving the chief, but maybe I'm wrong. At this point, I haven't read too much more. I'm gonna read it later on. In terms of the characters, they're so complex after just only 5 chapters. The themes themselves are very interesting, and this manga is very sophisticated. I really enjoy it. I'm gonna keep reading this manga, and I think I'd highly recommend it. I vouch for this manga. In the future, it's gonna have an animated series, so I'm pretty excited for that. If you like the video, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what I can do better. See you next week with another manga impressions. Oh, also, if you have any recommendations for manga, please put them in the comments below. Thank you.